Today we are making sourdough maple pecan scones. Not only is this one of my favorite flavor combinations for the fall season, but you are going to figure out how easy it is to make sourdough scones. These are flaky and light and a tad crispy on the edges, but they are so soft and tender in the center. I love the little inclusions of chopped pecans for a little bit of crunch. Then they are topped with a sweet and delicious maple glaze. They are to die for. So grab your sourdough discard and let's get started. First, we're going to grab a large mixing bowl and your kitchen scale. And then we're going to start with our flour mixture. To the bowl, add 280 grams or about 2 cups of all-purpose flour. To sweeten up our scones, we're going to add 120 grams or a half a cup of light brown sugar. I've also used dark brown sugar and it is just as tasty. To help give a little lift for our scones, we're going to add 14 grams or 1 tablespoon of baking powder. Finally, add 3 grams or a half a teaspoon of salt. Give that a little whisk. And set this to the side. One of the key ingredients for this recipe is frozen butter. Frozen butter allows you to get all those lovely flaky layers in the scones. It's so amazing, it's so delicious, and a beautiful finish. Some recipes will say use cold butter. I don't like to chance it, and I like to use frozen. Using a box grater, we're going to grate our frozen butter. This allows the butter to be easily incorporated into your dry mixture, and it's so much easier than using a pastry cutter. We're going to grate 113 grams or a half a cup of unsalted butter. Watch out for those fingertips. I like to just take my bench scraper and I'll scoop it under my box grater and for easy transfer of the butter. Little tap tap, there she goes. And add your grated butter to your dry mixture. With your hands, just mix that until the butter is lightly coated with the flour. You'll see the butter will turn into like pea-sized pieces. Frozen butter is crucial for this recipe. When you place the scones into the oven, you want that butter to be solid so that it will release some steam, creating those flaky layers while the scones bake. If your butter starts to melt or it is too soft when you place those scones into the oven, you'll end up with flat scones, and nobody wants flat scones. I don't want to risk the butter melting, so I'm going to place the mixture into the fridge while I move on to the next step. Moving on to the pecans, we are going to add 55 grams or half a cup of chopped pecans. You can roughly chop it with a sharp knife. I'm going to use this cool kitchen gadget that my mother-in-law gave to me. Watch this. I grabbed my butter mixture quickly. I'm going to add the pecans into that. Give her a little mix. Make sure there's no big pieces. And pop it back into the fridge. Now for the wet mixture. In order to keep the butter solid, we're going to use ingredients while they're still cold. First, we're going to add 140 grams or a heaping half cup of sourdough discard. You can use active starter for this recipe. However, I use sourdough discard because I can store it in the fridge and it's nice and cold when I'm ready to use it. Then we're going to add 30 grams or 2 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. Got to get every last drop. 1 cold egg. And 8 grams or 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Whisk until smooth. Now we're going to slowly pour in our wet ingredients into our dry mixture while stirring with a rubber spatula. Continue to mix to fully incorporate the wet ingredients. When you are mixing, you don't want to overmix and melt your butter. But as you notice, if I were to grab my dough and press it it starts to stick together. That's what we're looking for. But if you're noticing that your dough is overly dry, you can sparingly add a little bit more of the heavy whipping cream. This can be dependent on your discard, if it's extra runny or if it's more fresh. So again, sparingly add a little bit more cream if you're noticing that your dough is still a little too dry. Pour the scone dough on your work surface and form the dough into an 8-inch disc. Now with your bench scraper, we're going to cut it into 8 even pieces. I like to cut it in half first, and then in quarters, then eighths. For a finishing touch, I like to top each scone with 1 to 2 pecans. Then you're going to place your scones on a parchment-lined baking sheet. To make sure that the butter firms up nicely before we bake, you need to chill your scones. I like to place them in the fridge for at least 30 minutes. If you're looking for something a little quicker, pop them into the freezer for about 10 to 15 minutes. I love these plastic covers. They fit perfectly for my baking sheets, and then I don't have to deal with like saran wrap and stuff. I'll be sure to leave the link down below. While your scones are chilling, preheat your oven to 400 degrees. For a nice glossy finish, I like to top each scone with some heavy whipping cream. You'll need about 15 grams or a tablespoon or so. Be sure to brush just the tops of the scones and not the sides, or that will prevent the scones from rising with all those flaky layers. Now that your scones have chilled and your oven is preheated, bake your scones for 18 to 23 minutes until the tops are nice and golden brown. While the scones are baking, let's prepare the maple glaze. To the bowl, add 30 grams or about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. I highly recommend using pure maple syrup. You just get a way better flavor. Then we're going to add 30 grams or about 2 tablespoons of melted butter. For a touch more sweetness, we're going to add 30 grams or 2 tablespoons of light brown sugar. And to make it nice and smooth, we're going to add 45 grams or about 3 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. Whisk until smooth. Depending on how thick you like your glaze, I would suggest adding anywhere between 95 grams to 130 or about 3/4 of a cup to a cup of powdered sugar. Give her a little whisk. I'm like Goldilocks. I like somewhere in between. Not too thin and not too thick. Now that the scones have cooled for a few minutes, it's time for the maple glaze. I'm going to use my whisk and drizzle the maple glaze on top. And just like that, we have delicious sourdough maple pecan scones. If you could smell my kitchen right now, you would be met with warm vanilla and the maple glaze. It is incredible. I love how it has just the slightest crispy edges, those beautiful flaky layers, but inside you are met with soft and tender scone. This treat is easy to prep ahead of time. Freeze a batch and bake later. It's perfect for when you're hosting guests or holiday parties. These are best served right out of the oven when they're nice and warm and freshly baked. Pair it with a hot cup of coffee and you have the perfect cozy autumn morning. I hope you give this recipe a try. Be sure to like and subscribe and I'll see you next time. Bye!